Hello everyone, back tuning into today's video. Going to have a quick look at the weather next week, 10 days in today's video. Now, this chance of colder weather that we was thinking might occur at the weekend and into next week, it looks like it's been pretty much eradicated again by the models overnight. Story of a winter in many ways. So, I wouldn't totally rule out the chance of some colder weather coming up at weekend and early next week, but it looks an unlikely prospect at the moment. It looks like it's generally staying Atlantic driven with the weather. I'll talk you through the charts in a second and show you what's going on. But before I get on with that, just very quickly to mention the advertising. There's video ads on most pages. So own that content when you watch them. You can close them back up again, and you're helping to pay for gas office by doing that. So thanks so much for doing that. Just starting off with central England temperature from Hadley. This is provisional for the first 5 days of the month. We stand at 6.2, which is an anomaly of 1.7 degrees above average. It's been a very mild start to March, following on from the really mild February as well. That came out at 6.1, which is over 2 degrees above average. So we're generally running between around 1.5 and 2.5 degrees above average at the moment. And as I say, this cold weather that we thought might be coming up at the weekend into next week, that's kind of being eradicated as well. So I would suspect those mild and warm temperature anomalies that we've had so far this March are going to stay with us for some time to come. These are the 500 millibar height anomaly flow charts for the next week to 10 days. We've got the ECMDF here on the top, the GFS, which we'll have a look at in a moment. On the bottom, 500 millibars, 80,000 feet is an area in the absolute high pressure. Low pressure being moved around by jet stream running above. But let's replace low pressure and red to high pressure. So these are mean flow charts. They're taking us to around the 15th, 16th of March. And we find we're in an Atlantic driven pattern here. So we've got high pressure to the south in the Atlantic, low pressure around Iceland. There's a little bit of a ridge trying to build up over Scandinavia. That looks quite weak. And overall the flow is westerly. So there's not going to be much in the way of cold weather coming up with that. The GFS is very similar. It makes more of that ridge over Scandinavia, but it's not in a position to do anything cold. Just settles down over the UK and extends back into this main ridge, which is actually in the Atlantic. Then we've got low pressure in the Northern Atlantic, and the flow of the jet stream is going something rather like that. So we're still placed more or less on the mild side, of the jet stream. The difference is just that we've got more of an anticyclonic influence, so it'd be a little bit more settled if that came off. Certainly no sign of anything particularly cold between the two models, ECMDF and GFS. So these are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next 2 weeks. The red line here is the 30-year temperature averages of the upper air temperatures. A bit cooler than average at the moment, although it doesn't feel too bad in the sunshine. I'm going to go milder than average through the middle and last stages of the week. By Friday, we could be seeing temperatures up to 17 degrees. Now, over the weekend into next week, we have got a cooling trend. The temperatures do dip down. But there's a lot of scatter in there still, so I'm just still a little bit uncertain about this chance of colder weather at weekend into early next week. You'll notice that we've got some very mild ensemble members, but we do also still have some really quite cold ensemble members. Between the mildest and the coldest, there's still something like a 20-degree temperature differential. So whilst the models are backing off from this chance of cold weather within the GFS ensembles, and I don't think they've been performing very well really this winter, the GFS ensembles. A bit disappointed with how they've been performing, but within the GFS ensembles there are still several members that are producing really quite a cold blast of wintry weather around the middle part of March. So the risk of cold weather for mid-March is receding, but with the ensembles looking that scattered, don't totally rule out the possibility, although, as I say, I think the chance is receding. In terms of precipitation, we've got some more coming up this week, and then into the weekend and early next week. There is some precipitation, but overall, you wouldn't necessarily say that's a very wet scenario. And I think, actually, we're probably, as we head up towards the middle part of the month, probably going to find that the rainfall that we've had through the early part of March has been a wet start to March. I think we'll probably find the rainfall in the middle part of the month begins to ease down somewhat. Temperature anomalies are coming out milder than average from the 6th through to the 14th of March. Milder than average temperature anomaly through most parts of Europe, although Scandinavia does look a lot colder. Precipitation anomalies for the north and west. It's generally looking a little bit wetter than average in the next week. The south coming out a little bit drier than average. I think overall we're still on the more unsettled side. Spain and Portugal looking very dry. So here's the generic charts. This is GFS for Friday, and we've got high pressure to the south over France. We've got low pressure in the Atlantic. We're bringing up this southwest wind, so that very mild, with temperatures potentially going up to 14, 15, possibly 16 degrees there, maybe even a little bit more. Then that low pressure comes through Friday night into Saturday. That's producing heavy rain and gale force winds, and it was this low pressure that was predicted to bring down those northerlies. The idea was that the low pressure would sort of sink through the country, move away to the south and turn winds to the north. Because we're keeping the pressure pattern across the Atlantic fairly flat, so we're just keeping the ridge extending through the Azores in towards Spain and Portugal, and the low pressures are up here. It means everything's just going from west to east, as opposed to the earlier scenario, which was to push that low pressure north to south. So it does turn cooler at the weekend, and it does turn wet and windy for Saturday, but it isn't a particularly cold scenario. Sunday looking showery, and then as we go through into next week, high pressure's building up. It's trying to get up towards Scandinavia. It's trying to get winds into the east, but that doesn't come off. We saw it on the height anomaly chart. The pressure is just ridging from the Azores in towards Central Europe, really, with low pressure still out around Iceland and keeping winds in from the west. So it has a go at getting an area of high pressure over Scandinavia early next week, but doesn't come to anything. The ECMWF looks like this for Friday, again dragging up that mild air from the south into weekend. It turns wet and windy, but not cold. We're keeping the winds generally from a westerly, flat direction as we go through the weekend. So showers and reasonably mild, sort of average type temperatures. That takes into start of next week as well. And no sign really of high pressure building over Scandinavia of doing anything cold. It's trying to ridge up towards the northeast, but generally it's still very flat. We're keeping winds from the west there into the middle part of next week. So there is that high pressure that's trying to get going up over Scandinavia. It is up there, but it's the Atlantic that's still the driver. It has been through so often through this winter. The westerlies are still in control of the weather pattern through to the middle part of next week. And we finish up on day 10, Thursday, 16th of March, looking like that. The high pressure's there over Scandinavia, but it's not doing anything particularly cold. We remain in this westerly flow. And there's probably a fair amount of dry weather by this point in the south and east, but north and the west, more unsettled. Now, don't entirely rule out the chance of cold weather next week, because we saw in the GFS ensembles there are still several ensemble members that are looking cold for early next week. But the operational GFS is backed up. The ECNEF was never really going with it with conviction anyway. And it does look as though up to the middle part of March, we're probably going to keep things fairly mild, remaining quite unsettled, but I think for the south and east over time, we probably do turn things drier as we run up to the middle part of the month. Right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.